Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a chilling true crime story from Canada's past, the Rainy River Mystery. In 1891, a young farmer named Thomas Blake Carruthers was found dead in his isolated cabin with 2 bullets in his head. His wife, Margaret Ellen Slack Carruthers, or simply Nettie Slack, claimed suicide. But was it? Or was this a cold-blooded murder hidden behind a forged note and a web of frontier secrets? We'll explore the timeline, the evidence, the trial that shocked Ontario. Did Nettie act alone, or did a small-town conspiracy let a killer walk free? For this video, we'll be getting information from Detective Murray's memoirs, where he recounts this mystery, as well as newspaper clippings from papers like the Toronto World, the Globe, and the London Advisor. If you love unsolved murders or mysteries, I think you'll enjoy this video. So let's unravel this 130-year-old mystery.
Our story begins in the mid-1880s, around 135 years ago in Perth County, Ontario, specifically in St. Mary's. Nettie Slack, a young woman in her mid-20s, marries her cousin, Thomas Blake Carruthers, a hard-working farmer born in 1860. Detective Murray describes Thomas Blake Carruthers as a quiet, inoffensive young man and a prosperous farmer and a good father. But he has more to say on his wife, Nettie Carruthers. He says that as a young girl, she was famed for her jet black eyes and raven black hair, her eyes as shiny as the hair was glossy. He goes on to say that she was very tall, very muscular, with big, broad shoulders and a swinging thread, and the mane of a powerful man. Murray seemed to be fixated on her eyes, saying her piercing black eyes were wicked looking, and there were few men in Perth who ventured to cross humors with Nettie Slack. Her eyes enhanced her attractiveness and yet seemed to mar her beauty. Though that wasn't all Murray had to say about Nettie. He goes on to say, when he first saw her, he thought to himself, what a plowman you would make, what a woodman you would be. But after all of that, Murray says that she was rather a good-looking woman, and admits that may seem like a paradox, yet in the case of Nettie Slack, it was perfectly true. Thomas and Nettie had 2 small children, one about 15 months old, the other 3 years, and seemed like a typical rural couple. A friend of theirs, named William Fotheringham, and a former schoolmate worked on a farm that was next to the Carruthers. The paper says that the 3 of them were on good terms. William's grandfather is said to have been rich when he passed away and left money to his grandson, William. With his new wealth, William Fotheringham would leave St. Mary's to settle in Rainy River, where he started a sawmill. After a few months, he returned to St. Mary's, where he advised Thomas Carruthers to go to Rainy River and engage in farming, promising that if necessary, he would give him work year-round in the mill. So Thomas went up to take a look. He returned a few weeks later and decided to make the move. He took his wife and 2 small children with him, leaving his relatives behind. The paper makes sure to note that all of Thomas's relatives were all highly respectable. Thomas built a small log cabin, and William made good on his promise and gave him work year-round at his mill. It says that it all went smoothly for a few months, but rumors would swirl about Nettie's close relationship with William, and Thomas would grow jealous. The woman with piercing black eyes and the man with his grandfather's money. William, who was unmarried, is said to have visited the cabin frequently, and Thomas told him he didn't want him coming around anymore. The rumor that Nettie and William were on very intimate terms caused the mill hands to talk, and it all reached the ears of Thomas. One day, when returning home, he would find William and his wife alone in the house. Hot words occurred between the 2 men, and Thomas threatened to shoot him if he ever saw William in his cabin again. So William left the cabin and Thomas went back to work in the field. But the paper says that this was only a trick, because after a few minutes, Thomas returned to his cabin only to find William and his wife together again, and it's alleged that Nettie's apron was torn off. The two started to fight, with Thomas winning. Thomas stated that if William did not get off the river, he would kill him. So with that, William left for Rat Portage the next day and would not return until Thomas was shot dead. A few days later, around 10 o'clock in the morning on January 3rd, Nettie said her and her husband had been on bad terms for a few weeks. After cooking breakfast for Thomas that he refused to eat, she went down to the river to get a pail of water through the ice. Before going back to the cabin, she stopped at the stable to feed the cow. Only being 30 feet from the house, she says she heard an unusual noise, and when she got inside, she found her husband lying on the floor. She ran to her neighbor, who then got a man named Fisher. Fisher came and found Thomas on the floor with a .38 caliber revolver lying close by, with 2 bullet holes in his head. And a suicide note was also found that read, "I have taken trouble to my heart. For the last 2 weeks or more, I have got worse. I have got to hate my wife and family. I often feel like blowing their brains out. I am bound to put an end to myself. I am going to riddle my head with bullets from back to front. I want you to accuse nobody of this bad deed but myself. Tell Ellen to go home to her father and mother, where she will be well looked after. Whoever finds this, I want them to publish it in every paper. Let people know what loss of property can do. This is my last week on Earth." A coroner's jury was impaneled, and an inquest was held. Only a few witnesses were examined, and Nettie was the principal witness at the inquest, and the coroner's jury brought back an open verdict. It was over 200 miles to civilization. There were no roads, only a dog trail in winter. But after the inquest, Nettie Slack took her 2 children and started out with a mail carrier to get away from Rainy River. She slept out for 4 nights in the snowbanks and finally arrived at Rat Portage, where she took the train for her old home near St. Mary's.
So Nettie fled back home, perhaps because she didn't want to be in a far-off town with no husband and no family, all alone with her 2 small children. She must have been desperate to leave Rainy River if she was willing to travel in the middle of the winter with her 2 small kids, sleeping at night in the snow. Or maybe she wanted to leave before they changed their minds about the open verdict, and the further away from that place, the less questions would be asked. With a few days travel away, and now safe with her family, she probably thought it would be about the last time she'd hear of it. Though she didn't know it yet, not everyone believed the suicide theory. A little more than a month ago, a petition was signed by nearly every farmer within a 10-mile radius was sent to the Attorney General, praying that a government detective be sent at once to fret out the mystery. So, the great Canadian detective, John Wilson Murray, the pioneer of scientific crime investigation, was on the case.
The paper reports that for the past 3 weeks, Detective Murray had been on the scene. Without disclosing his identity, he remained among the people gathering up evidence. Murray says that he had the body exhumed and had a post-mortem made and had the head cut off. He says that the moment I saw where the 2 bullets entered the skull, I knew it was not suicide but murder. One had entered well around the back of the head, behind the right ear. The other entered the left temple. The doctor showed that either would have caused death as it crashed into the brain, and I saw clearly that Tom Carruthers never shot himself in the back of the head and also the left temple. Murray learnt of the note and started to question Mr. Fisher, who found the note when he was with Nettie. Apparently, while the corpse was lying in the shanty, Mr. Fisher and Miss Carruthers went up into the garret while the neighbors were sitting below, and after half an hour returned with the note. Upon further questioning, Mr. Fisher said that he had found the note in a coat pocket belonging to the dead man, which was wrapped up in a bundle of old clothes. Murray obtained specimens of Nettie Slack handwriting. it was just as he suspected. The farewell note was a clumsy forgery written by her. An expert on handwriting was engaged and is prepared to swear the writing on the paper is not of Thomas's hand. Murray interviewed a druggist at Rat Portage and is prepared to swear that William Fotheringham applied to him for strychnine but was refused, stating that it was for Miss Carruthers who wanted to poison rats. Murray returned to Rat Portage and laid information against Nettie Slack Carruthers and obtained a warrant for her arrest. Murray was on his way to St. Mary's when he learnt that she was in Toronto. Murray returned to Toronto and after a diligent search located Nettie on 23 Stafford Street and was employed with Miss T. Eaton & Co. as a clerk. She was placed under arrest by Murray, but owing to her being indisposed, she was not removed to the county jail, a guard being left on watch for a day or two. But not everyone was happy that Nettie was treated much better than your average prisoner. In this case, Miss Carruthers, after being taken into custody, was driven to the Metropole Hotel and given a very comfortable room. Rarely is a prisoner accused of murder accorded freedom, except that freedom which is surrounded by iron bars. The paper says when she wasn't in her room, the greater part of her day was spent in the parlor of the hotel where until noon she was in the company of her two brothers. She chatted freely with her guard during the afternoon and laughed heartily after reading the newspaper accounts of her husband's death and the recent arrest. When looking at her photograph in a local paper, she turned to her guard and remarked, "Isn't that horrid? It don't look a bit like me, does it? And as for that hat, I never wore one like it in my life." And I'll have the photo she was laughing at here on screen. It was the only one I could find of her. You can see that hat she said that she never wore. I also have one here of her husband, but she or the paper didn't have anything to say about him. Nettie would amuse herself at the piano frequently and sang many sacred songs, such as "I Will Sing of My Freedom" and "Peace, Peace, Be Still." The paper says she has a sweet voice and touches the piano like a mistress of music. In the evening, many curious persons dropped into the parlor to have a look at the prisoner, and each case she met their gaze with a pleasant smile, apparently treating the whole affair as a huge burlesque. We also find out that William Fotheringham was much opposed to her marriage with Thomas Carruthers, and that it's stated on good authority that Thomas was insured for $1,000. But Nettie couldn't get possession of the money after her husband's funeral, so Thomas gave her funds with which was to leave the country. Detective Murray said that her family feared the arrest and declined to make known her whereabouts. Strangely, Murray does not follow the usual practice of questioning the accused criminals after they have been arrested, and he told Miss Carruthers that he did not wish her to make any statements to him whatever, as he might be called on to use it as evidence at the trial. Murray and Nettie will leave at 11 o'clock this morning for Owen Sound, where they will board the Alberta for Port Arthur. Once Nettie arrived at Port Arthur, she was brought to Rat Portage for the preliminary hearing to see if there was enough evidence to go for a murder trial. We won't talk about the preliminary hearing because much of the information is brought up again in the full trial. And a true bill of murder was found, though that bill didn't seem to make her nervous because the paper reported her saying, "You see, you are not going to get rid of me so easily as you thought. I shall stay with you another 6 months," was the remark of Miss Carruthers as she slapped the jailer on the shoulder when she entered the lonely cell, committed for trial at Rat Portage for the murder of her husband. Nettie was sent back to Port Arthur to begin the trial for her life. If Nettie is convicted, she will be sentenced to hang. No life imprisonment option existed in 1892. The paper cast doubts on Nettie's innocence, noting that William Fotheringham, Arthur W. Fisher, and John P. Kerr are all strangely advocating the suicide theory, are all comparatively young men and bachelors, implying that they might have wanted to gain a favor or two with Nettie Slack. But the defense of McLaren, MacDonald, Merritt, and Shipley would not do. So her family searched for the best. But to afford the best, Nettie's father and brother had to mortgage their farm. They were able to secure the help of Britton Bath Osler. Osler was one of the best legal talents of his time. So determined was he that, it is said, a prisoner had little chance of acquittal with Osler prosecuting. Formidable in appearance, he frequently persuaded jurors by leaning over their box like a 13th juryman and addressed them in a firm, logical manner. A lot of weight has been put on the forged note and the skull that has 2 bullet holes. Detective Murray and Crown Prosecutor Cluth claim to have a very strong case. While B.B. Osler is satisfied he will have no doubt in convincing the jury that Thomas Carruthers committed suicide. Though, in his book, Murray didn't all seem too confident in the jury selection. While in jail, Nettie's sister had an organ sent to her, and Nettie would play sacred music and sing hymns day after day. Murray also says that the jurors were selected by the sheriff, and through some mistake, the merchant at whose house Nettie Slack's sister stayed was drawn as a juror, along with others inclined to be friendly to the prisoner. Even the paper notes that in the history of a murder trial, there were no jurors challenged either by the defense or the prosecution. The reason given was that the scene of the crime was over 400 miles west. At the trial, the paper says that nearly every inhabitant of Rainy River has been summoned to give evidence. And with that, on June 9th, 1892, the trial starts promptly at 9 o'clock. The prisoner entered the dock, attired plainly but becoming in black and wearing a black straw turban with a single jet feather. She walked firmly along the aisle, smiling and bowing to such of the Rainy River residents as she recognized. Her face had an anxious, almost haggard expression. She looked more like a woman of 45 than one of 32. She watched closely every detail of evidence and frequently prompted her counsel. Mr. Cluth, in detailing the case, alleged 2 motives that the prisoner had for removing her husband. 1, her love for William Fotheringham, and 2, the $1,000 life insurance that her husband carried. Emma Jordan spoke about how Nettie and Fotheringham were, and of the apparent indifference Nettie had after her husband's death, and of the contradictory statements made by her. Arthur W. Fisher detailed the circumstances under which the body of the deceased was found, the indifference of the prisoner of her loss, his reprimand for her for speaking about obtaining the insurance money the day following the fatality, the designed manner in which the letter alleged to have been written by Thomas Carruthers was found by his wife. After the initial inquest, Nettie told him, "They can't do anything to me," and his reply, "You know that best." He also provided several letters he had received from Miss Carruthers that were put in as exhibits to prove that her handwriting in these letters were the same as the suicide letter. He also said that Thomas gave William a black eye during one of their fights, saying that Miss Carruthers explained that Fotheringham had called her husband a liar and that the latter had in return struck him. He also told Fisher that Fotheringham wanted her to elope with him, but she said he couldn't support himself, let alone her and the children.
The paper doesn't say what was in those letters, but it does say that Fisher's evidence as to what Mr. Osler admitted was rather strong language showed the woman to be familiar with the coarse oaths. That can be seen as a deliberate character attack by the Crown and the press. In the Victorian period, a woman who swore like that was seen as morally loose and capable of violence. By highlighting that she was familiar with the coarse oaths, the paper was trying to convince readers and the all-male jury that Nettie was not a gentle, grieving widow. She was a rough, passionate woman who could have murdered her husband.
George Warts testified to hearing a quarrel between the Carruthers the night preceding the tragedy, and hearing the prisoner say, "You're a liar." And his wife, Miss Warts, told how she found the prisoner seated in Fotheringham's lap. Mr. Osler started his line of defense when the medical evidence commenced. He stuck to the suicide theory. Dr. Fair of Rat Portage, who made the post-mortem, said that after 2 hours of questioning, he thought that the wounds were not inconsistent with suicide. The skull of the dead man was produced, and as the witness took it in his hands, the prisoner burst into a violent fit of weeping and kept her head buried in her hands for an hour. Though in his book, Detective Murray didn't see it like that. I produced the skull and showed to the jury how impossible it was for Carruthers to have shot himself where the 2 bullets entered the head. Dr. McDonald had the skull in charge, and it slipped and fell on the table and rolled to the floor. Nettie Slack laughed. Osler saw her, and quick as a flash, he opened out his long gown like a curtain and stood so the jury could not see her. He then walked back to the box with his gown open and said, "You villain, it's crying you should be instead of laughing. You deserve to be hung." I heard him. Straight away, Nettie Slack wept. "That's better," said Osler, and he drew in his gown. Osler and I often talked of this afterwards. If Murray is to be believed, Nettie Slack seemed to have gotten very lucky that the judge, jury, or the reporters never saw this interaction take place. Dr. Clark, superintendent of the Toronto Asylum, Dr. Bryce, secretary of the Provincial Board of Health, Dr. McDonald of Rat Portage, and Dr. Beck of Port Arthur, each of whom expressed the opinion that the wounds found on the deceased's head were homicidal and not suicidal, and all agreed in the hypothesis that Carruthers was seated in a chair, that the assassin crept up behind him and fired a shot into the back of his head, that the bullet probably rendered him unconscious, and that he fell to the floor, where the assassin sent a second bullet into his brain. Mr. Osler's cross-examination of the doctors was long and thorough. Our familiar friends, the German stonemason who drove 2 chisels into his brain and lived, the Vermont iron crowbar case of 1848, in which a man lived 12 years after having a crowbar blown through his head while blasting, and other remarkable cases cited by Erickson, Staples, Dunton, and others were again quoted and discussed. Mr. Cameron, professor of clinical surgery in Toronto University, was strongly of the opinion that the deceased could have inflicted both wounds himself. In support of the contention that the deceased would have returned to consciousness after the first shot, he cited the case of young Woods, shot on Wells Hill, Toronto, on Queen's birthday, and who returned to consciousness after 4 days prior to his death at the hospital. Mr. O'Dia of Toronto testified not only that Carruthers did not write the letter, but the chirography was identical in many respects with that of the prisoner. He had no hesitancy in saying, in fact, that the letter acknowledged to be in the prisoner's writing and that the suicide letter were written by the same person. In his book, Murray says, "I had the handwriting experts to prove the farewell note a forgery." The wily Osler admitted the letter was a forgery, and turning to the jury, he exclaimed, "What would a poor woman do in a strange country but look for an excuse to defend herself from an unjust accusation that might be made?" He was a great lawyer and a resourceful advocate, was Osler. Maggie Aldrich, the young school teacher who lived on Rainy River, said that the quarrel between husband and wife referred to by Watts never took place, and that Carruthers appeared to be despondent. But she admitted under cross-examination that he told amusing stories all that evening. Maggie saw the prisoner, lifted the cloth from the body, and kissed the deceased. All other witnesses swore Nettie had shown no sign of grief of this nature. Witness denied that prisoner was singing the day intervening between the death and the funeral. William Fotheringham enters the witness box. He is described as small, square-shouldered chunk of a fellow, anything but bad-looking. He positively denied that the prisoner ever sat on his lap, that he ever paid any attention to her other than friendship that might be expected in old schoolmates. He denied that he ever scuffled with the prisoner. ever tore her apron or had improper relations with her. He admitted, however, the quarrel between the deceased and himself and gave his version. Carruthers came to the mill to me and said, "You've got my missus so that she cares more about your affairs than mine." I said I was very sorry. "You made her presents of money," continued Carruthers. "No, nor anything else," I replied. Carruthers then said, "You're too friendly with her anyhow." With that, he struck me, blackening my eye. Though he swore that 2 days later, Carruthers came over and apologized. Within a week, Fotheringham left the river for good, but he denied that it was in consequence of a threat he had heard Carruthers made that if he remained around there, he would put a bullet in him. He also said that he had since received 3 letters from her, which he had burnt, but the contents were nothing he was afraid of. Osler then called his last witness, William Somerville of Blanchard, a brother-in-law of the deceased, and several others were called to prove that the deceased had fits of despondency, during which he expressed himself tired of life. That ended the trial, with the paper saying that prisoner showed the same marked self-possession, keeping her eyes consistently on the witnesses, except when William was testifying, when she cast down her eyes, never once raising. After the trial, papers started reporting that within 24 hours, Nettie Carruthers will be a free woman, and that the murder of her husband, for murder he unquestionably was, will be added to Ontario's list of unpunished crimes. After eloquent addresses of counsel and the exhaustive charge by Judge Armour, the case was given to the jury, who brought in a verdict at a late hour, declaring Miss Carruthers not guilty. After an investigation and trial that lasted well over a year, Miss Carruthers was acquitted on Saturday, June 11th, 1892. The last followed of the trial is that the body of Mr. T.B. Carruthers, the victim of the Rainy River tragedy, formerly of Blanchard, was interred there Monday in the Episcopalian Cemetery. Sometimes I wonder if Nettie ever went to visit the grave of her murdered husband in the town that they grew up in. Murray, in his book, had this to say: "I showed that Fotheringham was not near the house at the time, and that no one but Tom and the woman and the 2 tots were there. Tom and the tots could not have done the shooting." The charge of Justice Armour emphasized this and clearly indicated who was guilty. The jury had a hard tussle, but the friends stood fast. After the verdict, Justice Armour, who said to the jurors that their verdict was not consistent with the evidence, and had said to the woman, "Prisoner, you are acquitted. I hope your conscience is acquitted." The woman sneered. Murray then tells of his last interaction with Nettie Slack. They were both on the same boat back from Port Arthur. She spied me on deck and came over to me. "Well, Murray, you didn't hang me after all," she said. "I don't hang anybody," said I. She looked at me and smiled. "You were pretty decent," she said. "But that old rowdy dow of a judge tried to put the black cap on me right in court. Murray, life's sweet, but it isn't worth much without liberty," she said, as she sniffed the air aboard the boat after almost a year in jail. I watched her as she stood there, her eyes flashing, her bosom heaving, a towering creature stirred by a sight of water, land, and sky. "Murray," she said suddenly, tensely, "it was worth it." "What was worth what?" I said. She laughed. Then her face, for once, seemed to become almost sad. "I mean, the year in jail," she said. "A whole year out of my life." She looked full at me, then walked away. It was my last glimpse of the lady with the piercing black eyes.
Here we are at Detective John Murray's grave. Not sure if you can make it out, but it says John Murray, born June 25th, 1840. Chief Government Detective for 31 years. Died June 12th, 1906. Looks like his daughter is buried here with him. Here at the Mount Hope Catholic Cemetery, we find the grave of Detective John Wilson Murray. His life helped inspire the 1979 TV show The Great Detective, as well as the Detective William Murdoch from the TV series Murdoch Mysteries. He passed away at his home located at 82 Brunswick Avenue on June 12, 1906, age 65. Lots can be said about his life, enough to make a video on its own. He released his book in 1904 and died 2 years later. I'll read the last page of his book, as I feel it has a nice perspective and conclusion to his life.
When a man looks back over his life, he smiles at thought of episodes that seemed very solemn and serious in their day. Time mellows his memory. In the recollections of my career as a detective that I have cited here, I have given simply characteristic cases. I have passed over countless minor cases and some larger ones that were counterparts of other crimes of which I have spoken. For crime often duplicates itself in monotonous reproductions of details. Death, for instance, comes usually along well-known thoroughfares in crime. It travels the way of the shot, the knife, the flame, the drowning, the poison, or the strangling. Its means are limited, but the manner of their manifestation is as varied as anything under the sun. There are few criminals of genius, and particularly there are few murderers with the genius of their work. Few make a success of crime. Crime is a merciless, misery taskmaster. It exacts all and gives little. It does not pay. It is a calling for fools. Yet men of intellect enter it deliberately, and here and there one of them may seem to succeed. But if they devote half the thought, energy, skill, and daring to any other line of business, they would make a far greater success of life and of work. But they seem destined to pool their existence in with the lives of the haunted. The criminal class goes its way, distinct and separate in itself. It has its own ideas of life, its own laws for its lawlessness business. It defies authority, and authority in turn pounces upon it and metes out its punishment. I suppose I should take the view that this world is a wicked, dangerous place, infested with mass murderers or desperate workers in the darkness, who rob and slay and well nigh deprive us of the joy of living. But I hold no such opinion. This world is a grand place. Life is a glorious thing. Crime increases, but not out of proportion to the increase in the population of our countries and of the whole world. Where men and women are, there will be found good and bad. But the bad are a hopeless minority. Our prisons do not hold the bulk of the majority of our population, and yet a fair share of those who ought to be in prison eventually get there. As civilization and science advance, crime will also advance. The detective business of the future will be far ahead of the detective business of the past. I hope that the future will see it raised to the high place of profession whose members will have pride in their calling and a careful preparation for their duties. As for me, I often think of the bygone cases, of quaint characters, of puzzling mysteries, of the solutions, and of the aftermath. They are the children of my career, and as I look over my large, flourishing family in the mansion of my memory, I sit back in luxurious and remark to myself, "Well, Mary, you've done pretty well after all."
And here's Osler's grave. The writing might be hard to read, but it says, Britton Bath Osler, K.C., son of Reverend Featherstone Osler. Our final stop here is in St. James Cemetery with Britton Bath Osler. He is the second son of Reverend Featherstone Blake Osler, who played a part in my Robert Coulter video. B.B. Osler had a wife who died young, at the age of 58. They had no kids. During her life, he built a grand 15-room stone summer estate referred to as Osler Castle, built in 1893 on a mountain property in the Blue Mountains near Collingwood, Ontario. His firm, Osler, Hoskin and Harcourt LLP, are still around today, though I'm not sure if any lawyer will be as good as him. I wonder if anyone now at the firm would, quick as a flash, open their long gown like a curtain and stand so the jury could not see you, and then say, "You villain, it's crying you should be instead of laughing. You deserve to be hung."
His funeral drew representatives from Ontario's legal, political, and intellectual elite, reflecting Osler's prominence as a top barrister. I'll name a few, but take a look at just how many the paper lists. Sir William Osler, one of the most famous physicians in history. Edmund Boyd Osler, a prominent politician and member of Parliament for Toronto West and financier. Featherstone Osler, a judge in Ontario Court of Appeal. Henry Smith Osler, who was the lawyer. Other notables are Sir William Ralph, Chief Justice of Ontario and Chancellor of the University of Toronto. John Hoskin, Osler's longtime law partner in the firm that became Osler, Hoskin and Harcourt. Justice Chief Thomas Armour, the judge who presided over Nettie's 1892 trial and criticized the acquittal as inconsistent with the evidence. So, that's all I have for today. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Stick around for more just like it.